Ethan, our producer, is going to throw one up here. Justin asked, how important is a credit score? So first of all, how it's made, right? What is a credit score? So obviously a credit score is how lending companies decide, hey, if we lend to you, how likely are we to get our money back? The less likely we are to get our money back, the higher interest we are going to charge you so that we can at least get as much back in interest as we can if we're not going to get our principal back, right? And so the way that they calculate that is I think it's like 30 or 35% maybe is on payment history. So how regular you are at making your payments, even if it's literally just minimum payments, which is don't recommend, especially on like a credit card, right? But do you ever miss payments? If you never miss them, you want perfect payment history. So whatever you do, always make your payments, no matter what. 25, 20%, 30%. I don't know. It's like 25 or 30%, somewhere in there, for credit utilization, which means of the total credit limit that you have, right? They say, hey, you've got a $10,000 credit card limit. You know, how much of that are you actually using? I think one threshold is 10%. The next threshold is 30%. Like you want to be optimally less than 10% and also good as less than 30%. Anything above that and certainly maxed out is not good. Because then they're basically, hey, we allowed you to use this money and you took us up on all of it. That's not a good look for you. So we think that you're probably struggling. And so we're just going to make sure we charge you a lot of interest to get that back. And then it's like 15% is length of credit history. Hey, do you have a long history of either bad or good history? And then it's like 10% for like how many times you inquire, like hard inquiries, how much you get in general, what mix do you have, student loans, etc. So there's a bunch of like 10%. I think it's all, but the main ones are these ones, and then length of history to a somewhat lesser degree, and then a bunch of little ones. So that's how it's made, right? Now, what credit score is not good for, because there are some people, as Dave Ramsey says, that worship at the altar of the credit score, where their sole focus is on getting a good credit score. And if anyone ever mentions to you what their credit score is, they probably don't get it. Because all a credit score is, right, is how good are you at paying back debt. It doesn't tell you how financially healthy you are. It doesn't say what your savings rate is, how much you have in investments, right? You can have $10 million, right, and have almost no debt or little debt at all, but then like miss a payment and have a less than perfect credit score, and someone who's got up to their eyeballs in debt and zero assets whatsoever, but they have a perfect payment history, and they're just they have a whole bunch of different credit, and so their total credit's like $100,000, and then they're only using 10 grand of it, but it's less than 10%, and so they have a perfect credit score, and they're going to think they're better off because they have an 820 credit score or whatever it goes up to, and it's not a good indicator at all of how wealthy you are, how good you are with money, any of those kind of things. So it's not good for any of those things. What a credit score is good for, I would say the number one thing, let's use green for this. The number one thing that you would want a good credit score for: mortgage. And this is where I do just disagree with anyone who says like just have no credit score, just get rid of all your debt and have zero credit score whatsoever, because you can get manual underwriting stuff. And it's true, you can get manual underwriting for an additional 0.5 to 1% tacked onto your mortgage, because you don't have any history of being able to make payments. And so having no credit history at all, no credit score at all, I do not recommend, unless you're literally never going to get a mortgage again ever in your life, or any other debt. But since most people are going to get a mortgage at some point, or already have one, or will refinance into one, or whatever else, having a good credit score, if it's 0.5%, 1/4%, any amount whatsoever, the difference between a good credit score and an okay credit score will literally cost you or make you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, tens at least, right? And so one thing, because some of it's like hard inquiries and some of these other things, there are people out there who, right, they'll open up a new credit card at the Gap to get 10% off one order, right? But that hard inquiry and that the other things it does to your history will add 0.25% the next time they get a mortgage, and they'll pay tens of thousands in extra in interest to save $50 at the gap or $10 at the gap. Don't do it, right? Don't do it. It's not worth it. So we do want good credit scores if you're ever going to get a mortgage whatsoever again, or any other kind of debt. And some people are going to want me to say you should never be in debt. Just pay off debt. Some people are going to say you should use other people's money to gain wealth. I have a kind of a more nuanced stance, I think, on debt, because I've seen people who are debt free and love it. And there's a phrase, you don't know what it feels like to live in a paid off home until you've been there. And if you're there, you can always go out and get another mortgage. Right. And so there's some people that just love it. And they'll say, once you're debt free, you will never regret it. And there's some people who are debt free and they have never regretted it and they love it. I know people who have lived that life, have gone debt free, and now wish they had kept their 2% mortgage from COVID. Just like, that's just not that great. It's like, who cares? I don't have mortgage payments. So what? Like, whatever. I also know people who scrimped and saved their entire life to die with millions of dollars and pass it on to their kids, who then just go blow it. And so, you will ultimately have more money overall if you don't use debt, don't buy things, save it all, invest it all. But to me, so here's kind of my thought on debt. Let me know if you think it'd be interesting for me to go further into this. Consumer debt is less overall, but sooner. Less overall, but sooner. And some people are like, well, hey, don't. What do you mean? What do you mean? Don't you get more? Like, you get more cars, all these things. But really, what it is, right, is if you buy a vehicle on a loan, you get it now, right? So you can either buy a vehicle and pay $500 a month for 5 years or 3 years or whatever, and you pay all that interest, or you can save up for 3 years and then buy the car in cash, and you will have the interest you made instead of the interest you paid. And so you will literally be better off by a couple $1,000. But that delta, that couple $1,000 in interest that you made instead of paid, meant that you had to wait 3 years to have the car, right? Or you could have had the car 3 years sooner, but had less money overall because now you paid interest instead of made interest. Does that make sense? And so if you keep doing that, right? If you keep waiting and saving and paying in cash, great. You'll end up just spending less overall, and so you will have more overall. And if you're trying to build wealth, that's a great way to do it, right? And so, if you're hoping to die someday with millions of dollars and not enjoy as much of life along the way, that's a great way to do it. If your goal is financial peace, right, and you're going through Financial Peace University, where that's the goal, financial peace, not wealth building university, not maximize your life university, Financial Peace University, then paying off your debt is an excellent way to do that. Going into tons of debt up to your eyeballs and never being able to save anything is always a bad idea, right? And that's usually, I think, where a lot of the pay off your debt, don't have debt crowd comes from, is they see too many people who can't afford to save because they have too much going out in debt. And so they're not saving 15, 20% of their income because they're paying 30, 40% of their income in debt payments. And that's a problem, right? And that's a separate issue. But for some people, it's like, well, hey, I know if once you are already doing those things, right, when you are saving enough, right, going back to what we were talking about in the earlier segment, you have a goal, you have a plan, you're achieving that plan, you are going to be able to retire on time, you are going to be able to do the things you want to do, you're saving enough, you've got your emergency fund, you're financially healthy, and you don't want to wait 3 years for the car. You could do it now, and you'll have a little bit less to pass on to your kids when you die, but you'll drive a fun car for 3 extra years. Or, hey, we can buy the car. I'm just using the car because that's like the classic, like, go a lot into debt for it, right? People aren't really poor because they buy coffees. They're poor because they buy cars that they can't afford. But if you can, right, and some people, they could just pay for a car in cash, but then it's pulling it out, selling things, paying taxes or whatever. And so it would be better to pay a couple of percent interest spread over 5 years than to pay an extra 30% in taxes in 1 year, right? And so there are different ways, if you're willing to look at it holistically, where you can get away with it and use debt and whatever else. So kind of maybe more of a nuanced view. But credit scores ultimately They're going to help you with a mortgage if you need to get one. If you do decide to adopt the less overall but sooner mindset, then certainly you would want a good credit score for that. But I would not focus on credit scores. I would focus on healthy habits, healthy behaviors, building wealth, building good savings habits. If you're still working, building skills to increase your income, all those things. And credit score should be a distant 80th on your list of things to worry about. So hopefully that helps, Justin. And if you have questions, again, you can email them into the show, questions@retirementorship.com, or leave them in a comment somewhere, and we would love to answer them.